Hey everyone, Will Brink here. Um, Being a little lazy today. Normally I would have my green screen behind me and my Brink Zone banner and all that going, but it's actually a little bit of a pain to set up that whole thing. So I just had a topic I really wanted to cover that was fresh on my mind that I think people will find interesting and potentially useful, and I just decided to go with the messy office route, which you all can see behind me. Got my wrong way. I got my it all goes backwards when you point at it. Anyway, you can see the multi-station gym behind me, and of course the Alpha Joe product stacked up for a little product placement. So, topic I want to cover, which is getting a lot of attention these days, is glutathione. Now, you notice by the title that I basically said stop taking glutathione, and that's not really a clickbait title. I will get to what I'm talking about, but I actually had a bit of a epiphany moment. Hold on, I'm actually going to click over to a Word doc if you don't mind. Okay, so I actually had a sort of what they call an aha moment the other day. So I've been writing about glutathione, benefits thereof, and all the things that glutathione may do since the mid '90s, when I started writing about whey, and that sort of went down the benefits of whey as it applies to glutathione, and I just had this like epiphany moment the other day, which was really to conclude that the longer that I read and research human health and disease and aging, it seems that all roads lead back to glutathione, literally, in one respect, either directly or indirectly. But that's a pretty bold statement. I admit that's pretty bold. But and I don't make statements that bold, that grand, that often. I do that pretty rarely. But when I do, it's usually pretty well supported. So, again, it's a grand statement. So this intro is going to be a little confusing. So now you're saying, okay, he's saying that glutathione is literally connected in one respect or another to pretty much, everything that we deal with. And now he's telling us not to take glutathione. So what does this mean? Um, actually, I'm gonna get to that in just a second. Give me a second. But another point. So glutathione, we've known about glutathione for a long, long time, many decades. Benefits thereof, or at least association of benefits, to aging and major diseases and brain health and all that. But where glutathione has really come back on the radar was due to COVID, because again, glutathione is absolutely essential with COVID. And I have what I will do is I'm going to link a whole bunch of stuff below this video, because so otherwise we'll be here for way too long. And so where glutathione really came back up on the radar, both in the medical community, medical science community, and just people in general, I think was with COVID, and it's gotten a real sort of re-interest in that community and a real big boost. And I have an extensive article that I wrote about COVID and what is the underlying pathology to all the negatives of COVID, which cover glutathione, and I will link that below. So that's where I think glutathione. I'm seeing a lot more videos. I'm seeing a lot more articles, and it seems like they sort of have a resurgence. And so what that also seems to have led to is a lot more products coming out, and a lot more people using glutathione products directly, whether ingesting it, glutathione. And I'm not going to go in, again, this video as far as what is glutathione, the benefits of glutathione. I mean, I hoping at this point, if you're at this video, you probably have, a bit of a background, but I will supply at the end also a recommended reading on that. But I think, like I said, I think for the most part, if you're here, you probably at least have a handle on what glutathione is and its importance and all that. I'm not going to go down there, but what I'm seeing. So I actually put what prompted me to do this video was I put up a post on my Facebook page, which, again, with this aha moment I had, which basically just said that 30 plus years or so of research, I've come to the conclusion that it just seems that all roads somehow seem to lead back to glutathione. And a lot of the comments that people posted was, you're right, I agree, and I'm taking glutathione, or I'm getting glutathione injections, and so on and so forth. And that was what prompted this. So there seems to be also, because there's increase in interest in glutathione, COVID, and so forth, you have a lot more people that are, interested in taking glutathione. And well, this is what I'm going to tell you to do, is stop doing that. And why am I telling you to stop doing that? So I gotta try to keep this simple, pretty straightforward. Again, I will link some papers and some reading underneath this. So first thing about glutathione is, of course, orally, it's very difficult to ingest and get it into circulation. But it can be done. I mean, if you take enough of it, some of it will get into circulation, it seems. But the real trick is not getting it into circulation. The real issue is getting into tissues, is getting tissue uptake of glutathione from serum into tissues, which is why some people were saying, I'm aware of the oral part, but, I get injections. So, I'm bypassing that problem. And the answer is that you're not. This has been pretty well defined. Now, I'll get to the reasons for that in just a second. But, another point I'd also like to make is, you would think this would be better researched. It's not as well researched as you may think, because considering how long glutathione we've known about it and all the benefits, and, the potential benefits of boosting glutathione, which we will get to in a minute. But it's not actually as well researched as you might think. And the reason for that is glutathione is actually pretty difficult to research. Again, it's not a matter of just saying, oh, his blood levels went up, it's working. Glutathione is a highly compartmentalized peptide, or tripeptide, that is produced in tissues, and blood levels, and serum levels are not particularly good indicators of what's going on. And it's also very short-lived. If you let's say you have an injection of glutathione or IV of glutathione, it lasts for several minutes, sometimes a little longer, give or take. Excuse me. A lot of stuff in the air today. So one of the problems with glutathione is actually it's not very easy to research. And so there's not nearly as much research on this topic that I'm going to talk about as you might expect, but there's enough to come to the conclusions that injection, IV, orally particularly, is really, really very inefficient way to boost tissue levels of glutathione. That's what really matters, right? Not that it's in your blood, but it's in the tissues, the target tissues that you're trying to get to. So why is that? All right. So keeping this simple as I can, two primary reasons. What we would call the concentration gradient, right? So the concentration gradient would be what we say intracellular, inside the cell, and extracellular. Well, the concentration gradient between them is extreme, and it is very, very unfavorable for it to go from extracellular, i.e. in your system, like you had an injection or whatever, into tissues. That is very, very unfavorable, and would happen by what we basically call passive diffusion. And anybody's taken basic chemistry knows that, if you basically pour, you have a fish tank of water, and you pour something on one end of the fish tank, milk or whatever, that over time, given time, it will all go from the high concentration gradient, where the milk or whatever you poured, and it will spread out, and it will be very diffuse all through that liquid. And that's basically just diffusion, right? The body does that to some degree, depending on what we would say the concentration gradient. But it's very unfavorable. That is, there's a whole lot more of it in the cell, because remember, like I say, glutathione is made intracellularly. It's produced in the cell. It is not produced outside the cell and then goes into the cell. By and large, most tissues, and I am generalizing a lot here. I mean, some of this is somewhat tissue and organ dependent, but just bear with me. So the concentration gradient is very unfavorable for any sort of passive diffusion, and it doesn't happen. I mean, so when they test it doesn't happen. So the next thing that the body would do would be active transport, which is, and the body does that quite a bit, which is actively, if the concentration gradient isn't favorable, or other reasons, again, we're overgeneralizing, the body has active transport, which is basically it will, grab something out of serum and pull it through the cellular membrane via it's got active transport. And there are there's various mechanisms to that. There are no active transport mechanisms for glutathione. And again, that is fairly well defined. Now, so the body is both not passively pushing it through on its own, on its own accord, nor is it actually taking it in. And that is, again, pretty well defined. Now, under certain circumstances, again, this is a very dynamic system. Different tissues and different organs can respond differently here. So I am trying to cover some really big ground here, but by and large, again, this is accurate. But under the right conditions, under certain disease states, let's say, again, you have, let's say cells are in some specific disease state where the cells are highly glutathione deficient. Again, you're going to maybe improve the favorability of some of that glutathione getting into those cells. So we're mostly talking about basically healthy people here, normal healthy people. So those are the main reasons why taking glutathione, even bypassing the oral issues and doing IVs and injections, is it is at best a very inefficient way of actually getting glutathione. Now, another point that I like to make that I think a lot of people don't that aren't doing the science thing and aren't really looking into this, and I have to be honest with you, even people that should know better, some medical doctors and people actually should know this stuff a little better. The body very commonly prefers substrates to produce things. It in our brains, we go, well, okay, here's the molecule the body uses. Okay, so let's just give the body, that molecule, whatever it may be. But you have to understand that generally speaking, again, the body does not like to will not generally let large molecules through. Glutathione is not a large molecule, it's actually pretty small. But again, what it will normally do, very commonly do, is even take that substrate or take that molecule, and break it down to its constituent substrates, and then it will put it back together again in the cell. So that is exactly what the body does with glutathione. So if you're taking glutathione is made of 3 amino acids. And what will happen is, again, at best, what you have is a very inefficient cysteine delivery system. Now, those of the 3 amino acids that glutathione is made of, cysteine is considered the limiting amino acid of the 3, which makes sense, again, under most circumstances. Now, under some very specific metabolic circumstances, some disease states and such, the other 2 can be potentially rate limiting also. And, we'll get to that in a minute also. But for the most part, again, in most metabolic situations, cysteine is considered the rate limiting amino acid. And basically, when you're taking glutathione, whether it's injections or IV or what have you, in all but some very specific situations, you probably will get some tissue bump in it, but that's basically because you're adding some cysteine to the system. It's not to say that you won't get any benefits, but it's minimal. And in some tissues, again, it's quite poor. The brain in particular, that's well established. The brain does not allow glutathione through the blood-brain barrier. Again, all you're really doing is at best delivering using a pretty crude cysteine, and expensive, cysteine delivery system. I mean, glutathione's not inexpensive, and especially to get glutathione injections and stuff this is not inexpensive stuff. So at best, like I say, what you are doing is using an overly expensive and overly complicated way of transporting some cysteine around, basically. I mean, and of course the other amino acids are inexpensive, and you can use those too. So that's basically why I'm telling you to stop using glutathione, stop wasting your money and your time on glutathione, and let's get on to the best way to increase glutathione status in tissue where it matters. And also, we're also not talking about just tissues. Also, we are talking about immune cells. Your immune system also is very dependent on glutathione. So, of course, we not only do we want to get it into some specific tissues, whether it's the brain, whether it's the heart, muscle, what have you. we are talking about, we'll talk about how to boost the importance of boosting glutathione. Let's see. So I have a little bit of I have a word page open here with some notes. So if I wander off a little bit, don't hold it against me. But honestly, I can't remember all of this stuff in my head. Let me get some coffee here. Hold on a second. This is I'm down to the bottom of my morning Alpha Joe here. All right. So another area that before we get a little bit to this, but this is, like I say, this is a very complex system. While glutathione itself is a very simple molecule, like I say, it's just a tripeptide. The metabolism and the systems, the glutathione dependent systems and interrelated systems and overlapping pathways are really, really complicated. And an area that has gotten a lot of interest in research, again, not, more recently, again, as I think, again, there's been greater appreciation, but you're also talking about redox metabolism. Redox is becoming, again, whereas maybe some of the earlier models were maybe overly simplified. Again, most models are simple. Your most early models that are proven to be either just wrong or just a whole lot more complicated than we thought. Let's just give an example. Early model, cholesterol bad. The end. Well, obviously, we've come to learn that quote unquote cholesterol is not bad. It's just a whole lot more complicated than the early model, which would just sort of suggested cholesterol quote unquote bad, whether you're eating it, whether it's in your so there's a lot of basic models, or fat bad. There you go. I mean, early on, after they did the early rabbit studies, and the rabbits died of heart disease from eating fat, the basic message that went out, the model that was proposed was fat bad. And we know fat is not bad. Again, it's more complicated. In fact, any nutritional, I'm changing topics just a minute here, but anytime you get dietary advice from another, pseudo faux expert that quotes X is bad, any food, bad versus good, whether it's carbohydrates, whether it's sugar, whether it's fat, whether it's seed oils, that's a whole other one, which I have a video on that, and so on and so forth. Ignore them. They don't know what they're talking about. They're trying to, sell you a product or a book or make themselves sound smart or whatever. As always, it's just a lot more complicated. So with that in mind, the original sort of model on things like antioxidants, glutathione metabolism, and so forth, were very simplified. And so what is now we're learning a lot more nuance and something called redox metabolism, which is a big deal. So what is redox, or what is the topic of redox? Well, again, if you've taken basic chemistry, but I'm going to make it really simple. Redox or redox metabolism is basically the ratio of oxidized to reduced or non-oxidized, antioxidants, or how is the system balanced, redox balancing, how is the system recycling itself? And that's what we're going to, next topic I'm going to cover a little bit. But redox balance in the cell is a big deal, and it's something that's much more, it's more complicated, it's more nuanced, but it's something that, funny enough, the thing that people, if you were ever owned a large fish tank, especially if you are someone who is big on really, really sensitive ecosystems like reef tanks and stuff, which I used to be a reef tank person. You already know about redox, and you actually are actually pretty up on redox, and you're even testing the redox status, because that's a big deal in the equilibrium of fish tanks in the water, is the redox status. So redox, basically, the real basic way just to understand redox is basically the balance in the system between what's being oxidized and what's not, and the cycling. And this is where we're in the next part of what we call redox recycling or redox cycling. And this is what goes on with glutathione in a big way. And that's where you have to understand sort of the next phase of our talk here, which is the ratio is not just the amount of glutathione and other antioxidants, but it's not just the amount of glutathione in the cell. Let's just in the tissue or the cell. It is the ratio, the redox ratio of oxidized glutathione to reduced glutathione. And now they're looking at a lot of diseases and such, where they're finding that it's not just the status of glutathione in these diseases, especially in brain-related diseases, but is not just the amount of glutathione. It is the redox status of the cell, the ratio. What they find is a higher ratio of oxidized glutathione to reduced glutathione. Reduced glutathione is the one that you want. Again, you don't want too much of either one. There is a balance. This is where you can't just say super high amounts of glutathione in the cell good. That's not the way. That's not how it. That's overly simple model. What you want, what is the beneficial, is what they're finding again is all about redox balancing and the ratio of reduced glutathione to oxidized glutathione. So that's a big deal, and this is where we're going to work our way through here. All right. So now let's hopefully I've explained, worked my way through as to why you need to stop taking glutathione. I mean, if you want to keep taking glutathione, that's on you, but I'm just making you aware that it is probably the least efficient way to boost tissue and cellular levels of glutathione. There is even some hypothesis here there's even potentially negative. And I don't know if there's really good data, and I'm not that convinced it's negative. I think the body probably, for the most part, tends to just deal with if you're IVing glutathione. But the potential negative that some have proposed, should I say, is that if you're really doing a lot of glutathione, say you were a steady drip of glutathione or something with high doses of glutathione, I think that's what it would take for this to be a negative. But having said that, again, this is a very sensitive system, and what you might be doing is, if there's a lot of glutathione floating around it in serum, that is, you may kick in that feedback mechanism in the cell to say, we've got too much glutathione, we need to start making less. And you actually, the thought here is that, of course, what you could actually end up doing is actually the cell is actually gets less glutathione, it's producing less glutathione, and now you're actually going to increase oxidative stress and inflammation. And that is the potential negative, in fact, of glutathione, taking glutathione externally through injections, a lot of it orally. Again, I doubt that somebody wrote that they were getting a 200 milligram per week injection of glutathione. I really doubt that's going to, give you a problem. It's a very short-lived, like I say, it's literally in the system for a couple of minutes. But I do think that there is a point certainly where you could take enough glutathione at high enough doses where the actual end result may in fact be a negative. I don't, that has not been studied. So just FYI on that. All right. So let's get into the best ways to boost glutathione. Okay. So the two most efficient ways to boost glutathione are whey protein and N-acetylcysteine. As far as what, is readily available, over the counter, not terribly expensive. There are some fairly esoteric interesting products and drugs out there. I don't know what, that were in development, but anyway, whey protein and N-acetylcysteine. Oddly enough, most people know about NAC. We're just going to call it NAC, N-acetylcysteine. And for, 30 plus years of my writing about this, I'm stunned how many people still do not know that one of the major benefits of whey protein is glutathione. Now, whey may in fact be superior to N-acetylcysteine for production of glutathione, and I have a video on that. I'm not going to go into details as to why that is. I will link it underneath if you want to get into that. There's not much in the way of, I would say, actual good comparative studies that have taken groups and actually examined those together. But there is very good reason as to why whey is likely superior to NAC. So those are the two best ways to boost your glutathione levels. But it's a bit more, it's a little bit, it's more complicated. As I indicated before, everything is more complicated. It's not just, okay, pop some NAC and get on with your life. You can do that. It's not the end of the world. But if you want to get the most from the products you're taking, whether it's whey or NAC, and the fact that, of course, again, as we get older, 40 is an amazingly sort of magic line in the sand for all kinds of things, give or take, of course. But on average, the age of 40, all kinds of things seem to happen. And I'm sure there's people out there, nodding their head who are, 45 or 50 or whatever, going, yeah, stuff started to hurt, aches and pains, hormones falling off, gaining a little weight, so on and so forth. So metabolically speaking and aging and so forth, 40 is generally sort of a line where a lot of things happen. And another one of them is that the activity of the enzymatic activity and so forth of producing glutathione starts to go down. Now, again, give or take, excuse me, give or take some years, of course, again, depending on how, some genetic factors, some epigenetic factors, depending on the big one, of course, is how well the person is taking care of themselves and so forth. But on average, there's going to be a bell curve, and in the middle of that bell curve is going to be, 40 years old. So you can take whey, you can take NAC. And I do have some other videos as to that topic. But for the body to produce glutathione from its whey and its NAC, there are cofactors the body requires to do that. Again, you were talking about support of enzymes. You are talking about microminerals such as, and I will link some of the cofactors underneath, so I don't have to go down the list of what those are. But the body requires a list of cofactors. There's B vitamins. There are some micrometals, minerals and so forth. I wouldn't overthink it too much. You can. That's my job to overthink things and all that. But I wouldn't overthink it too much. But again, if you're taking a good quality multivitamin, and a couple other doodads, you should be fine. I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't overthink it, but you should be aware of what those cofactors are, and you should probably take those along with your whey and your NAC. There are also what we'd say basically glutathione support nutrients. So a little bit back to the redox cycling. Glutathione has been called the master antioxidants for a reason, because it really sits at the top of the food chain of antioxidants in the body. However, all the other antioxidants, or most of the other antioxidants, your C and your E and your selenium, which is actually an enzymatic cofactor. It's not onto itself an antioxidant, but the other antioxidants are all part of that cycling of the redox cycling. That is, we like to use the word recharge, but basically they are all the different important antioxidants that are basically below, I would say below. Now, some of them, they have their own effects too, like vitamin C, of course, has its own effects, and vitamin E has its own effects. Alpha lipoic acid is another one, has their own effects. However, one of their main effects is as reducing agents for each other. They work in these cycles. They're all part of this redox metabolism, and they support, at the top of that food chain, they support glutathione, so that glutathione can easily, again, be in that reduced state, do its job, detox and go after pathogens and heavy metals and support your immune system and fight viruses and do all the amazing stuff that glutathione does. And so there are what I call support nutrients. There's cofactors, support nutrients. And again, I will list some of those support nutrients underneath the video with some reading materials recommended. So finally, the final thing that we're going to talk about that is really interesting, that is, it's not really a cofactor nor a support nutrient per se. It's sort of its own thing. And these are called NRF2 activators. And I'm going to read something. There's a couple of them. Well, there's more than a couple, but there's sort of a few that have been tested. One that sort of seems to stand out a bit, and that is called, I hope I'm going to pronounce this correctly, sulforaphane. Sulfur, obviously a sulfur containing a phane molecule. And sulforaphane, I probably should have looked up how to pronounce that before I made an idiot of myself. But anyway, is something that is derived from vegetables such as broccoli and related, and it boosts glutathione. Now, probably one of, of course, various vegetables are associated with lower disease rates and lower cancer rates. Well, probably one of the main reasons for that is because they contain this molecule which boosts glutathione, and they are called NRF2 activators. So from a paper, one of the papers I'll link below, but so these are basically NRF2 activators are a redox sensitive transcription factor. So remember that word redox, and they're a sensitive system, again, that is can sense the redox status And if the redox status is in the negative, that is, there's excess oxidative stress, i.e., which of course leads to inflammation, which of course inflammation and subclinical or acute inflammation both are associated with every major disease, i.e., cancer and heart disease and diabetes and brain pathologies and muscle loss, and on and on and on it goes. So these NRF2 transcription factors are sensors of redox status. And so if you activate them, they activate them, and they will basically have a sensing capability to improve that redox status. And what they do is they can boost glutathione in the cell. And again, remember, in the cell versus outside the cell. If I know I'm throwing a lot at you all, but remember my discussion. The thing about these NRF2 transcription factors, if you activate them, the data shows that they increase glutathione in the cell, intracellularly. That's the big deal. So compounds that can activate NRF2 activators are receiving a lot of growing attention due to their potential GSH boosting capabilities. They can be targeted pharmacologically, in diseases that the underlining factor is, as I mentioned, oxidative stress and inflammation, such as neurodegenerative diseases, vascular diseases, various metabolic diseases. It goes on and on and on. So these NRF2 activators are really interesting, and you can get, obviously you should just eat a lot of vegetables, but you can get sulforaphane supplements. I get one myself. I use one from Life Extension. I also get one there. Hopefully there's one being sent to me from Immunotech. Hint, hint. So hopefully I have covered all these topics that help people. You can leave comments below. Again, remember, I'm gonna drop a lot of links for you to catch up on all this. So don't worry about it too much. Finally, because I've been on again 30 minutes, I will leave you with if you want to read up on a lot of this. I also will leave below a discussion between myself and Dr. Gutman, who I've known a long time, which really good info. But so if you want to read up on this, here's so that's Dr. Gutman's book, The Comprehensive Guide to Glutathione. And again, Dr. Gutman and I have been known each other quite a long time and have regular communications. And this is a really good book. I'll link it below, so don't worry about it. But anyway, this is a really good book. If you want a reference book that goes through everything that I talked about here and more, obviously, because it's a big book, this is the book to grab onto, and it will go through all that I talked about. In detail with sources and so forth. The only thing I would say is that even since he wrote it, and he's updated this book a number of times, this is the 5th edition, even since he's written it, proper English, even since he's written it, there's a lot of data that has come out specific to what I was talking about, especially with obviously COVID. So if you're interested in the COVID specific glutathione COVID thing, read my article. I have to say, again, to toot my own horn, I identified that and wrote about that when all that started. It's been a major missed opportunity in treatment and by the mainstream medical community with COVID. And again, I outlined that, and I wrote about that. I've updated the article 5-6 times now, and data is just starting, frankly, to catch up to what I was talking about. So if you want something beyond this video, you want something beyond what the links that I post below, I highly recommend. I will link to Dr. Gutman's. I'll just link to the Amazon page if you want, or actually there's a direct link to the sales page for the book. I'll link that below too. So hopefully that covers the topic of why, in my view, I would recommend not using glutathione. I wouldn't use it as a supplement, nor would I get injections, and nor would I get an IV. I might, under some very specific medical conditions, disease type states, would consider IV glutathione. But again, we have some very good data, especially for the brain, like I say, but other, because of the reasons I gave you there, there's no reason it should passively work its way into cells, and there is no active transport for moving it into cells, at least in most tissues they've tested. There may be some exceptions. I'm not going to say there isn't. For example, the lungs. Okay, so there's an exception in that for some lung diseases and stuff, IV glutathione does get directly to lung tissue and probably will have some direct benefits. However, there's nebulized. You can do nebulized glutathione, and you can do nebulized NAC, and they both appear a benefit. So even some of the there has been some studies, for example, Parkinson's disease, and glutathione IV, and they did find some benefits. Interestingly, though, they were very short-lived. And again, we know, at least we have some very strong data, which I will post below, that shows that the blood-brain barrier does not allow glutathione through. So, well, what's happening? Well, what's probably happening is that the body, again, is breaking it down into its constituent amino acids, and then transporting it across the cell membrane or across the blood-brain barrier and then to the cell membrane and putting it back together again, which, is pretty inefficient. So there you go. All right, so that's it. I think I've got it all covered. Hit the like buttons and subscribe. Of course, this video was brought to you by Alpha Joe. Tastes good, feels good, good for you. And in fact, interestingly, coffee has been shown to raise glutathione mildly, as has a couple other doodads. And I don't think you go wrong with, of course, coffee and some Alpha Joe. So that's it, and I'll see you all on the Brink Zone.